I want to welcome all of you to Hawaiian IANDS. I'm your host, Shaun Lether. I am thrilled to welcome our very special guest, Dr. Pamela Gerali. Thanks to a series of spiritually transformative experiences, our speaker, Pamela, overcame a fundamental conservative upbringing to embrace spirituality and discover her true divine essence. Pamela learned to listen to her inner voice and received the blueprint for the human spirit, her guide for conscious, compassionate living through a series of divine downloads. She also evolved from a left-brain medical professional into a gifted, intuitive healer. From a timid introvert, Pamela is now a confident powerhouse, creating life-changing programs and guiding others on their spiritual journey. She became brave and bodacious enough to share her amazing story of healing and transformation through a one-woman show entitled Confessions of a Spiritually Promiscuous Woman. Although she finds sitting in silence and stillness a huge challenge, Pamela has had many profound experiences during meditation. She will share tonight how she has relived dramatic events from 15 past lives in one 90-minute meditation and made a huge shift from a body-mind to a heart-soul perspective. Pamela is an intuitive healer, inspiring author, empowering speaker, and illuminating leadership mentor. We are so thrilled to have her share her experiences with us today. I look forward to learning from her stories. You can find more about Pamela at our website at drpamelagerali.com, where somebody will put a link in the window in the chat. Also, if you haven't downloaded your free ebook, Blueprint for Conscious, Compassionate Living, it's available on her homepage. Also, you can download the handout for the Blueprint Archetype Matrix that Pamela will be discussing tonight at the link in the chat. For folks watching our replay on Hawaiian IANDS YouTube channel, the links will be in the description. So welcome, Pamela. So glad you're here.
Thanks, Shaun. I am delighted to be here with your group and with everybody from around the world. How exciting to be a part of this. And certainly I haven't had an NDE, but I've had many spiritually transformative experiences, and certainly they all help us in our efforts to be all that we are.
Great. Well, I'm going to let you just take it off from here.
Sure. Thank you, Shaun. I am thrilled again to be with you all and to share some of what I have learned. Shaun mentioned that I came from a very fundamental conservative background, and certainly it was very limiting. My worldview was probably the size of a pea because I grew up in a tiny little town, and I was beat up by religion. So when I went away to college, I left that behind and pursued a career in nursing and public health and worked for many nonprofit health organizations. I had a chance to work for the American Cancer Society as a national consultant. I was a program director for Prevent Blindness America. I worked for the Oncology Nursing Society and a few other organizations. So I had a lot of wonderful experiences with advancing leadership positions. And there was one moment in time when my life took a turn. I was invited to go to the Center for Creative Leadership in Greensboro, North Carolina. If you haven't been there, it's an amazing place. And while I was there, I did visioning and journaling for the first time. We worked with change partners, and we had advisors that were social workers, artists, actors. We made touchstones. It was just such an amazing experience that when I went back to work, I realized that my job was no longer compatible with my new vision, and I walked away from my career. I left it behind so that I could pursue a spiritual path. Now, at that time, I didn't know the difference between religion and spirituality because I was, religion was so negative to me, but I knew there was something was missing in my life. So I became a spiritual junkie, and I read every book that I could read. I went to every holistic expo and workshop. I studied all the teachers. I tried all the practices. And while I was doing that, I was very afraid, because I was told as a child that anything that wasn't literal Bible was from the dark side. So I had to overcome that in order to allow myself to accept and receive and to enjoy and benefit from what I was learning. But I was still concerned. And then I started receiving divine downloads. I would be awakened at 3:30 in the morning, and information would flow into me. And I would lay there and try to remember as much as I could for about an hour and a half. And this happened 3 to 4 days a week for 6 months. And in the process, I received all this beautiful information. It came with sacred geometry, which I didn't even know what that was at the time, but there were all these beautiful shapes and designs that had energy and color to them. And in the process, all that information kept growing and evolving until I had what I call the blueprint for the human spirit. And I'd like to just share with you what that looks like. Okay, I don't want to do that. I want to move to the next. There we go. This is just a little taste of what the blueprint for the human spirit looks like. There are 5 fields of existence: the quantum, personal, social, global, and eternal. And there are 5 dimensions: the physical, mental, emotional, intuitive, and spiritual. And each one of these cells, there are 25 cells in the matrix, they all reveal an aspect of life. And in the process of receiving this information, I learned so much about myself, and I figured out how everything came together. It was like all the pieces of the puzzle. So when I would go to a workshop or read a book or something, I would get one little nugget, and some of that became integrated into the blueprint, but it all came into this beautiful, cohesive format that really appealed to my left brain, because I was very left brain. I was science trained, I was a nurse and worked in public health. And so it was a wonderful way for me to kind of put everything into perspective. It evolved step by step over 6 months and then beyond, in harmony with my own personal growth. And every time I received new information, I had opportunities to learn and integrate it into my way of being. Also, what I realized about the blueprint is that it is compatible with ancient teachings and new science, Eastern philosophy, and Western psychology. So it is relevant to students of all faiths and all walks of life. So the blueprint became my inner teacher. And I still questioned it because I wasn't quite sure. You know, when you grow up like I did with a lot of fear, in fact, I called it the unholy trinity of guilt, shame, and fear. When I was raised that way, you know, everything, I doubted myself. But there was one point in time where I thought, if I could just have someone like Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer, when he was living, tell me that this is good, this is true, this works, then I would be comfortable, you know. And so I wrote this affirmation in my journal. I wrote, a guru is coming into my life now. Well, then I heard this voice. well, what am I, chopped liver? It's almost like I wasn't trusting this inner voice, but I learned to trust it. I learned to accept it, and I learned to align myself in harmony with the teachings that I had received. So the blueprint became my teacher, and it became my passion and my purpose. It also became something that has guided my life and has helped me to make huge shifts. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a moment and mention that initially the blueprint was a very interesting intellectual exercise for me because it was conceptual, it had a lot of information, it was logical, it was rational, it made a lot of sense. But it wasn't really something that I felt because I hadn't gotten to the point where it was fully integrated into my way of being until I had this one meditative experience where I was sitting on my lanai, and this was about 6 years after I had received the blueprint. I was sitting on my lanai early on an October morning, and it was raining. And very quickly, I went into this deep meditative state. Now, I'm hyperactive and I like to talk, so it's not easy for me to just sit in the silence. But as I sat there very quickly, I went into this deep, deep meditative state. And I had no idea how long it was until it was all over. But one after the other, I experienced a dramatic event in the lives of 15 individuals. These were, I know they were my past lives, but I also view them as archetypes. And it was so powerful because it was like I was them, I was there. And these dramatic moments, some of them were horrific, some of them were so euphoric that I could hardly contain myself, but I hardly had time to recover between experiences because I would just like take a breath and then the next one would hit me. They were people from all walks of life. They were from ancient Mayan times to early 1900s. They were men, women, and children. Some of them were very poor, but they were such interesting characters. So I'm going to share again a chart that shows about these 15 people. Okay, there we are. And you can see it looks very much like the blueprint chart, which is really neat because it all kind of fits together. When I woke up from this dramatic event, I ran to my office. It was a Sunday morning and we were planning on going to church. So I ran into my office and I wrote in my journal just a couple of lines about each one so I would remember them. And then I counted them and there were 15. Well, it just so happened that at that time I had 15 primary cells in the blueprint matrix. And they fit. When I went to church, a friend of mine looked at me and said, "What happened to you?" Because I was so overwhelmed, I could hardly speak. And as you all know, from having near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences, they are so powerful that it is life-changing. And it takes time to be able to really integrate and to be able to figure out exactly what the message is. But this friend of mine said, go home and write it down, write everything you can remember. And I am so glad that she did that, because since I spent 8 hours writing everything I could recall, and in the process, I discovered so many things. First of all, I realized that each of these past lives reflected an aspect of my life today. So it wasn't necessarily relevant, certainly it was all about the past, but it was about the present as well. And I discovered that some of these past lives were victims and were treated horribly. Some of them had tried hard and failed, used their ego effort, and it didn't really pan out, or they missed the mark in some way. And there were some who got it. They were able to live more consciously and compassionately. And you can see from the chart, I don't know whether you can read it very well or not, but each one also reflected a core shift in consciousness. Each one had a critical piece of information that was relevant to me to help me live in harmony with the truth of my being. So all of these individuals are a part of me. But what I also realized was that the stories that I relived were very powerful, and they were very symbolic, so that it wasn't just about the story, but it was about the deeper hidden meanings that really made a difference. And so this is something that I would encourage you all to do. Certainly, when you have an experience, write it down, because if you don't, you will lose it. And I am so thankful that I did that, because I have a document that ultimately at some point, hopefully, will be a book or maybe a movie, who knows. But in the meantime, I learned so much from these 15 people. And I want to share with you next a way that I have learned how to glean more and learn more from these experiences. So I hope it might help you in the process. And we'll talk about some of these interesting people at a later time, but let me just share something else with you here. This shows how from different fields, from the personal, social, global, and eternal fields, how we start with being powerless victims. In fact, that is the lowest level of spiritual awareness. And then we strive to make things happen by our own effort. When we're powerless victims, things happen to us beyond our control. And we feel out of control, feel like we, don't have choices or whatever. But ultimately, we learn how to stand up for ourselves, and we use our own effort to make things happen by us. And then ultimately, we continue to evolve to a place where we become the vessel, where things happen with us and through us, until ultimately we are able to express the essence of our being, and we can show up as the hands, heart, and the voice of God. So here is this path. Now, it looks very familiar, doesn't it? This is the spiritual path. This is how we get from where we began to where we desire to be, so that we can express our divinity through our humanity. So I don't know whether that chart helped you or not, but hopefully you'll gain a little insight from that. But I would like to share some of the stories with you and see what you think about them, because they're pretty powerful, and they certainly have had an impact on me. So back to the chart of the archetypes. And what I'm going to do is just share with you about the physical dimension triad, the three below the physical dimension. Now, the first one, now I did not experience these in this order, and I have no idea how I, what happened when I experienced them and during that 90 minutes. But when I wrote them down in my journal, I wrote them in this order, and I realized how powerful that was because they fit perfectly into the blueprint matrix. So the first one was a virgin sacrifice from the Mayan Indians about 5,000 years ago. And there was this gal was 13. She was the first born after the winter solstice. And so she was groomed for 13 years to be this sacrificial virgin. And she didn't know what was going on, but her mother got a lot of kudos from this because it made her feel important. But when this girl turned 13, there was this big ceremony, and she was turned over to the high priest and taken to the altar. Of course, she felt that she had been betrayed. But this is interesting in that 13 is a very special number. Often we're considered to be mature enough to make choices when we become 13. It's kind of a time of maturity. And if you think about the idea of the higher priest, when you're 13 and you supposedly have enough wherewithal to make good choices and to know right from wrong, it's almost like your higher priest, or you have accountability, you have a sense of awareness. And so there's a lot of symbolism in all of these things. And when she was sacrificed, they took her heart. And of course, that's a powerful message as well. It's like giving your heart over to something more positive, to yourself, and taking good care of yourself is the lesson that I learned from her, because we have to take care of ourselves physically so that we can do our best. In fact, if we follow the wisdom of the heart, I don't know how many of you are caregivers. I am. I have my 91-year-old mother who lives with me 6 months a year. And when we are caregivers, we have to put ourselves first. The heart first pumps oxygenated blood to itself before the rest of the body. And that sustains the heart and us. So that is the lesson that I learned from this particular archetype or past life. And the interesting thing is I was born on December 22. So my birthday is compatible with this sacrificial virgin. And when my husband and I visited Tulum, we walked through the ruins and it felt so familiar. It felt so real. And I looked at this one foundation and I said to my husband, that was our home. And I mean, it was just so interesting that would happen because I don't always sense things like that. But certainly that was one experience that reinforced this particular archetype and past life that I experienced. Now, below the sacrificial virgin is the impoverished mother from Appalachia in the 1900s. This mother I had heard about before. I had visited with a medical intuitive. I had stomach issues, and this is before I started doing my own healing work. But I visited with her, and she told me that my stomach was giving me problems because I was allergic to wheat and corn. Of course, I had been tested by medical professionals who thought it was gallbladder and who knows what else. And they said, no, you're fine. But I knew I wasn't. But she said, you know, that. And then after she talked to me, she asked me if I had any questions for her. And I said, well, I would be interested in why I chose not to have children in this lifetime. I have 2 stepdaughters, and in fact, I have a granddaughter and 3 great grandbabies, but I am not a mother in the biological sense of the word. And she said to me, she looked at me with her eyes wide open, and she says, well, you were a mother and lived in Appalachia. You went through 3 husbands, lived in poverty, went through 3 husbands, had 22 children, and many of them died because of illness, because of lack of food or whatever. And you said that you could never do that again because you grieved so deeply for them. And it was such a, it was just too much. You just couldn't do it again. So I thought, well, that was interesting. And it just so happened that during my 90 minutes, this impoverished mother appeared. And what I experienced with her was that I was lying on a cot, and I opened my eyes. I was trying to get some rest. I opened my eyes, and there were like 5 or 6 dirty urchin faces leaning over me. It was like they were looking to make sure I was okay, and to they were trying to wake me up because they were hungry. And, you know, I was at a loss because I just didn't know what to do. And I knew that because there were no more husband prospects in the area, that we probably wouldn't survive. And it was very difficult to know that and to feel that. But the message from this particular archetype or past life was that we are here to nourish and protect those in need to the best of our ability. And we can't always save everybody, but when we do our best, when we use our power of observation, and when we allow the love that we are to flow out into others, that we do make a difference. We help them to be all that they are. And certainly that is something that we want to do as loving individuals. So those were 2 kind of powerful archetypes. And there was another one in this triad, and I'm going to share another picture with you. This is Tanate. He's an American Indian shaman, and I have encountered him a number of times. My sister took me, the first time I was aware of him, my sister took me to an intuitive artist who drew him as one of my spirit guides back, I don't know what year that was, 94, something like, anyways, 96. And I was just amazed when I looked at him. He has these beautiful eyes, and look at his medicine bag. And of course, there's an eagle with a scroll. And that is the blueprint that was given to me, the wisdom given to me. But this shaman has just revealed many interesting things to me. First of all, the first time I encountered him in a meditation, I was sucked through a wormhole 1,000 years, and I was sitting at a fire cross-legged as an Indian, a male, and this guide, Tanate, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "We're going on a journey." And we climbed a mountain, and we started up this mountain, and we went so far, and then we stopped and rested because it was a long, arduous journey. And of course, you know what climbing a mountain means: raising awareness, elevated levels of awareness so that we become more open. And as we climbed this mountain, we would just pause every now and then for a break. And when we got close to the top of the mountain, we merged as one. Tanate and I were one. And in that moment, I knew that our spirit guides really are a part of us. We are one with everyone and everything and all that is. And that experience was truly transforming to me because I knew I learned something so powerful from that particular meditation. Another time in meditation, Tanate gave me his medicine bag and all the power and all the gifts and all the healing that came with it. And what a gift. And of course, I became an intuitive healer. And so that was a part of that as well. Now, in my 90-minute meditation where I encountered Tanate, I was, as him, looking at the community that I served as healer, as spiritual leader. And I knew what was coming. I knew that we would be dispersed. I knew that our lives would be changed forever. And that I was so committed to telling all the people that they should just continue to be as one with the earth as they could be, to live as joyfully and as functionally as possible. And I guided them, even though I knew that the end was going to be difficult. But I just felt so compelled to lead them and to help keep their lives going in a way that was meaningful to them and to the community. So certainly what I learned from Tanate at this particular time was that when we respect and sustain Earth for future generations, it makes a big difference. I mean, that is how we are connected to the Earth and how we are connected with all others. But Tanate is a wonderful guide and someone who has appeared many times. And I'm certainly delighted to share a little bit about his story with you. Now, there's one other archetype that I encountered that was not a part of this 15-day or 15 past life group. In fact, after I spent 8 hours writing everything I could recall about about these 15 people, I put it into a document. I had like 12 pages of information and charts, and with each one, I mentioned how they certainly were relevant to my life today. And I took this document to a friend of mine who was a therapist on Friday, so a few days later, and I told her about this experience, and I was still so overwhelmed I could hardly communicate what had happened to me. And she said to me, "Would you like to do a regression?" And I thought, are you out of your mind? I have all these 15 people. How on earth am I going to even figure out what their message is and integrate that, let alone, and I thought, oh, what's one more, right? What is one more? So this gal guided me back in time. And when she did, I was a child at the feet of Jesus when he said, "Let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And this is a photo that represents that experience. When I was this child playing at the feet of Jesus, he was like a beloved uncle. He hugged us and we sat on his lap, and he was so happy to be with us. And, when all the parents, they wanted the teaching to start, he said, "No, let the children come to me, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." And in that moment, I knew exactly what that meant. It meant that as children, we are innocent, we are pure love, we are open, receptive, playful, joyful, we are curious. And all of those things is what we aspire to achieve on our spiritual journey. And so what this archetype, this final one, represents to me is that eternal realm of being that was part of the blueprint. And there's only one archetype, because at that point we are in a state of oneness. But this also was very important to me because there have been times after being raised in a fundamental home where I was a victim of religious abuse, so to speak. I had almost thrown the baby Jesus out with the bathwater, so to speak. But I had discovered that Jesus was also one of my teachers, one of my primary teachers. In fact, another gifted intuitive artist drew a picture of Jesus when she was drawing my spirit guides. And it brought me full circle back to my roots, but now I understood the teachings in a whole different light. Instead of taking everything literally, I realized that I could understand the teachings in a way that were more spiritual, more mystical. And certainly when we interpret our experiences like NDEs and STEs, if we look at them in a variety of ways, it can help us. We can look at them literally, factually, and certainly the stories are interesting, but then we can also look at it like from a heart perspective, from an allegorical perspective, from a psychological perspective or a mystical way. And in doing that, we understand better the symbolism of the stories instead of just looking at them literally. So this is a little bit about what happened to me when I experienced the 15 past lives. Now, plus the extra regression. What happened as a result of this experience was that I experienced exactly what the blueprint meant. Instead of it being just an interesting intellectual exercise, very physical, very heady, it became a heart and soul kind of thing for me. So I made this huge shift from being somebody who was just total rational, logical, to somebody who was much more open to feel and allow things to flow, to know the spiritual essence of what was going on. So there was a huge shift in my life. And because of that, I know that I have made far more deeper strides on my spiritual journey. And it has been a fun one. Shaun mentioned that I wrote and performed a one-woman show called Confessions of a Spiritually Promiscuous Woman. And that is a story that I shared in a little different way. And if you're interested in watching that, you can find a link on my website, drpamelagerali.com, on the About page down at the bottom. And you can actually watch this show, one that was recorded at Unity of Venice. I was able to share my story and speak in a number of communities, number of Unity churches throughout the country. And so you might find that interesting. A lot of people feel that they too have been through the similar process, because the journey there, we all share similar things. We may start in victimhood or with challenges, health challenges or whatever, and then we find our way and we move to a point where we know our divinity, where we are able to embrace and express the essence of our being. And then we can show up as the hands, heart, and the voice of God here on earth. So this is just a little taste of what I experienced. So I'm going to ask Shaun to pop back on here for a minute and I'll stop share. So Shaun, I didn't know if people had questions that perhaps I can respond to, if they want to hear more about some of the other archetypes or whatever.
Okay, yeah. So if everyone just send me your questions in the chat, but I already do have some. And the first thing that I want to say, which I've mentioned to you, but I love the title of your show, Confessions of a Spiritually Promiscuous Woman, because after my NDE, I was, with the Buddhist one day doing meditation and the Hare Krishnas the next, and going to Unity Church the next. And a friend of mine, she called me a spiritual slut. So I love that you, yeah. Yes. And it's like, for me, I found truth in all of them. So I really love that you have put that into a show. That's
yes,
so cool.
and certainly when you go down to the core teachings, the original teachings of all the masters and all the mystics, they are the same for the most part. It's been adulterated over time, but there's truth in it.
Yeah, I love that. So, and I also love all the work that you put into describing these different archetypes. And to me, it's fascinating. So I hope you do a book on it. I actually hope you do just a class on it, because the nerd in me comes out and I want to like learn more about these
Yes.
archetypes.
Yes.
It's really amazing. It's
Well,
absolutely amazing.
I did a workshop for the National IANDS conference in Salt Lake City. And so I would be open to doing that again online if people are interested. So you'll have to let me know.
Yeah, that would be cool. I would love to do that for sure. Okay, so it seems that the description that you were showing an evolutionary process, maybe, that we go through.
Yes.
Do people evolve? Like, do we get some lessons and then kind of screw up and go back, or what?
Well, I think we all have moments where we are less conscious, perhaps at times because of what's going on in our lives. We may slip and say things or do things that may not be totally in harmony with the truth of our being. We are all fallible. But I think it's a process. We learn and grow, and we embrace these opportunities because we know that they're for a reason. You know, it's so many times we can't be, it's not an act, let's just say. And sometimes we may feel like we are a little bit of a fraud because we question something. And that happens to me. I think that happens to all of us, because that's the humanity, the human part of us, you know. And ultimately, though, we do learn how to express our divinity through our humanity. But, you know, I don't know about devolving. I think we could, maybe somebody else has some insight on that. I haven't really thought of it, but I do know that I'm perfectly imperfect, just as we all are, and we all make mistakes. And that doesn't mean that we devolve, but we have to give ourselves allowance for that, and we have to overcome that and bring ourselves back on track. And one thing I learned through the blueprint is that oftentimes what we think and what we feel and what we know in our gut, so to speak, is not quite all in harmony with what we do. And so the key is to bring all of that into alignment. And that is what the blueprint has helped me to do. And it gave me a way to look at life so that I could put things into perspective and integrate things and bring things into alignment.
That's beautiful. So I want to go to the blueprint in a few minutes, but there's a few more questions about past lives. Okay. So why do you think your soul wanted you to experience all 15 in 90 minutes? What do you
Yeah, talk about a crash course. Why did that happen? I don't know. I don't know of anybody else who's had that kind of an experience, because it certainly was very profound, and it affected me so deeply. I mean, when I think about these people, I still, you know, can hardly express it. But with the blueprint, it came together in bits and pieces, one at a time. And I believe that I had, after 6 years of it evolving and be working with it and trying to share it, not real successfully at first, but trying to share that, what I realized was that I think it happened all at once, because the blueprint had all come together and I had it. And so what I was missing was the heart piece, the feeling piece, the experiential piece. And that is what NDEs and STEs do. It provides that hardcore experience, it's just a full body, full, complete experience that you can relate with and use then, because you feel it. It's not just a thought, it's not a fact, it's not an understanding, it is the experience. So unless we have those, I think we're missing the mark, because then what we're doing is just expanding the mind, what we know. And I have worked with so many people doing healings that it's like their heads are like this big, because they keep cramming more and more and more information in, trying to figure it all out, trying to understand, trying to move forward on this spiritual journey. And their heads are like out to here and out of balance. But that isn't enough. You have to have the experience to go with it. You have to feel it. And that's why we do experiential learning, and why we do meditations and guided meditations and imagery and things like that. So I think the universe said, she's ready, so let's give it to her. and I'm very blessed that that happened. That was very powerful, for sure, as you can tell.
Yeah. Do you think you asked for it? Do you think on some level you asked for this?
I think I needed it. I wouldn't have known what I needed, so I don't think I was specific. And I do invite into in a variety of ways, help me to be more aware, help me to be more a brighter light, that kind of thing. But so I'm not sure, but it was perfect, as always.
I think what I really love so much about what you've done is that, to me, I just started learning about past lives in the last couple of years. And I have this knowing that I'll experience them when I need to know. And then I also realized, like, the only thing that really matters about them is the baggage that we're bringing to this life, right?
Yes. And some people get caught up in the drama of the past life. But for me, they are archetypes. And certainly there are people who don't believe in past lives. And that's okay, because you can explain these encounters or whatever in a variety of ways. First of all, everything in the universe is recycled. So we have cells in us from all these other people, from the past. And we are intuitive, so we can tap into other people's lives. And we also can receive things like parables or ideas. And so, you can't explain it in other ways. But to me, the experiences were just so personal and so powerful that I knew that they were past lives. So, and I'm so thankful that this happened. And I'm so glad they all happened at once, because it just made sense. It just fit. Everything fit together.
That's wild. So actually, a few people do want to hear, if you want to share one or two more past life experiences.
Okay. Let me go back to the chart, and I have to, oops. There. Okay. So is there any in particular that people are interested in hearing about?
Yeah. So if you guys want to put in the chat what you want to hear about.
Now, I will tell you that before this time, I was aware of the impoverished mother, the Indian shaman, and the joyful dancer. The joyful dancer is from the emotional dimension down at the global realm. And I had studied a little bit when I lived in the Chicagoland area. I had studied at the School of Metaphysics. And they, at the time, I don't know whether they still do this, but they did readings from the Akashic records. And I was told about this joyful dancer and about how she was from Russia in 1820s, had 8 children. And of course, when you're have a career like that, it doesn't last long. And but she helped all of her children to develop and express their creativity, which I thought was very interesting. During this meditation where I experienced her, I mean, it's one thing for someone to tell you about your past lives, and many of us have been told, but it's another thing to experience an event in that life. That is huge. And so that's what happened to me. But so I heard about the dancer. I thought, oh, she's cool. You know, I like to dance. I like to, and she was an ice skater too, I guess. And I grew up on the ice, you know, in Western Pennsylvania. But in my meditation where I experienced her, I was dancing and there was an audience, and I was so caught up in the movement and in the in sharing this. It was almost like I was in another state of mind. I was transported, and everyone that was watching the performance was so touched because it was coming from a higher place. You know, it wasn't just me moving. It was, they were watching something that was sacred. And so it was a very powerful, very euphoric type experience, unlike some of the ones that where I was abused and traumatized. So any specific ones anybody wants?
Okay, so here's the herbalist.
Oh, the herbalist, yes.
And also the gifted gay artist, which I would like to hear.
Yes.
You know, why would somebody, you know, choose to evolve as a gay person? And then somebody else wants to know who is the highest, most evolved one.
Okay, all right. Well, the herbalist crone was interesting because back in Druid time, you know, they were also burning herbalists and healers at the stake because that was part of the Inquisition and whatever. But this woman was able to share her gifts with the community. And when the powers that be who didn't agree with what she was doing would come around, she gave them the evil eye. And she just showed them, you know, she just, with a look, she just made them cringe. So she was a powerful, powerful lady, and someone who followed her inner voice. And that is the lesson here, to listen to your inner voice and not to worry about what other people say and do. Just follow that guidance. But she was quite the lady. And there is Hildegard, I believe is her name, was kind of that type of a person. So the gay gifted artist was from the Renaissance, and he was a sculptor in particular and did other things, but mostly sculpted. And because at the time, the wealthy people used to become patrons of artists, and then they would take all their work and keep it to themselves. But he resisted that option that was presented to him because he wanted the public at large, people who were not wealthy, the average everyday person, to be able to enjoy his works of art. And so he lived pretty frugally and made sure that everybody got to enjoy and to see what he created and were inspired by his works of art. And he, because of that, he was accepted by the community. So he made a choice not to go the route where he would have everything that his little heart desired in terms of comforts and whatever and lifestyle. He chose to share in a very positive way. Okay, was there another one?
Oh, yes, there's several. So the next, everybody loves this. So the next one, somebody wants to know which one is the highest, most evolved one.
Oh, the highest, most evolved. Well, beside the beloved child of God, of course. And I believe it was in the spiritual dimension, the global, the martyred saint. Now, this is like Joan of Arc, and I'm not sure if it was her or not, but it was just like this experience. So this woman, young woman, was, gave of herself, and she was so powerful. And then she was, the powers that be didn't like the fact that she was such a powerful young woman. And so she was burned at the stake. And the experience that I had was of her with the fire. And I didn't feel the pain, fortunately, but her prayer was that everybody would get the message, that everybody would know. And all the people that were watching this saw the light. They saw that she was authentic, that she was highly evolved, that she was doing everything that she could to bring forth truth. And in the process, it was okay because, and her final words were that already done, that they saw the light.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Okay, how about the scholar orator?
Okay, now before I talk about him, I want to just mention something about the one above the scholar, the deaf and dumb child from colonial America. This child, a little girl, was unable to hear or speak, and her parents didn't like her around the house, so they sent her to school with her siblings, to this one-room school, and all the kids were together, and she was she couldn't share what she thought and what she knew. I mean, she was very intuitive. She knew all this stuff, but she couldn't express it. And she kind of hid under her desk because the kids would pick on her and they just made her life miserable, because here she was, she wasn't like them. She was different. And we know how kids can be pretty cruel at times, as can adults, but she had all this knowledge, she had all this wisdom. It was just trapped within. And it reminded me of when I was a child. I can't tell you how many times I heard little girls are to be seen and not heard. And perhaps every child hears that at some point. But the message was that we need to be open and receptive to new ideas, to express that, and certainly the scholar and orator. So when I look at these, I look at them in terms, I don't know whether I can use my, I was going to use my highlighter or my laser. Use my laser. So here, these This is the mental triad. So this is all about expanding the mind. And so this child couldn't express what she knew and couldn't share. But the scholar and orator was like Galileo. And of course, at his time, he understood about things that the powers that be did not agree with. And when he shared his truth, what he knew and learned about the universe, he was hung for speaking his truth. And the message that I received from him is that we have to express what we know fearlessly and without apology, even if it's different from what other people believe. And that way we are open, but the results aren't always positive. Like with him, he lost his life as a result of what he shared, because it was in opposition to church teachings and to what those in power believed at the time. So, and then certainly we talked about the gay artist, but he was able to express in positive ways, you know, and share his creativity. So that is a very powerful tribe. You can see the evolution from victims to perhaps failures to conscious co-creators, and then ultimately, you know, beloved child of God. So would you like to hear about the emotional dimensions?
Yeah, and the
Or
other
where
thing,
are we in time wise?
we're fine. It's up to you, actually, how
Okay.
much energy you have. But
Okay, let's
'cause-
let's just move over to the spiritual dimension. I mentioned about
yeah, let me just ask you first, though.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, so what I want to make sure is karma. What, you know, explain your perception of karma. Is any of these lives punishment for anything? Why are we experiencing the different lives? I think that's really, oh, and so let's say you make it to the global conscious creator or eternal, you can still have physical illness, correct?
Yes. And
It doesn't mean
yes,
you're in, like, that
we're
you're
still human. We are
yes.
still human, and we experience everything that we do. I mean, we still have an ego. And certainly I want to talk about my book, The Dance of Ego in Essence. So I want to share that a little bit about that with you too. But with regard to karma, oh, I heard someone say not long ago that karma's over, you know, but I do think that the choices we make, the things that we do, we create our lives one choice at a time. And for everything that happens to us, there's an element of our own personal choice in it. So victimhood is a huge, huge thing in our world, in our country. And I believe that certainly that's the lowest level of spiritual awareness. And the blueprint does offer some guidance to help us get out of that, because we need to let go of that and we need to move forward and become strong enough to stand up and become empowered so that we can be that vessel that we are, the hands, heart, and the voice of God here on earth. So I don't know whether that answered your question or not.
It helps. No, it helps a lot.
Or maybe I scooted around it somehow.
No, you did great. Yeah, you did great. And we do want to make sure that we have time to talk about your blueprint, like
Yes.
what that is, why,
Okay.
you know, how that's going to help people. Also remind
Yes.
people that it's free, and then we can talk about your book.
Okay, this, let me see here if I can go back. One more. This is the most basic chart of the blueprint, and it does show an element of what each of the 25 cells represent. And the quantum level is like universal laws. And those came to me kind of as a separate entity, those laws. And then as I was working with the chart, I thought, oh my gosh, it fits right in here, because I had the personal, social, and global, and then I had received the eternal sometime later as I evolved, but that those universal laws were kind of hanging out there by themselves, and then they just fit. So it's a perfect way to see all these different things. So you can tell that each one of the cells focuses on something different, and it helps, even though it's all one, and the lines to me have become very clouded. It's like it all is melding together, but it helps us to focus on one aspect at a time, because then, it's not so overwhelming. And when I received the blueprint, I received one aspect at a time. And in each of the cells, there's so much more. For instance, there are qualities that we exude that help us to thrive. For instance, in the physical, let me see here if I can get this going again. Where did that go? Laser. There we go. So everything's energy, of course, which shifts and moves, on this continuum, and our intention impacts that until we sense oneness. The body, for instance, to learn about that and to thrive, there are some things that we need to do. We need to eat well. We need to get exercise. We need to sleep, balance sleep with activity, and our certain tools that we have to help us. And so each one of these cells, there's so much information, but the blueprint is here to help us. And certainly this chart is available on my website for free. But if you download the ebook, it tells you a little bit more about how the blueprint evolved and how it can help, how we can benefit from studying this kind of thing. And certainly you can put a lot of your own experiences into awareness. Now, I am intuitive and do intuitive healings, and I call it spiritual blueprinting. And when I work with individuals, usually I can sense exactly what cell we're working on at any given time. And when I do my intuitive healings, sometimes it's about the past, sometimes it's about the future, sometimes it's about the present. It could be about past lives, and it could be physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual in nature. It can impact all aspects of life. And certainly Shaun and I had a chance to spend some time together. So he had an experience of what I do when I do intuitive healings. I receive information through my body, which is unusual. Sometimes I hear things, sometimes I see stuff, but for the most part, my body goes into motion. And when I start moving, I just know what it means. And there was one moment when I was in bed, which is where I received a lot of my divine downloads. And I had a download that just went from the top of my head down to the bottom of my feet. And it, maybe I'll stop sharing here. And it revealed to me what every part of my body meant symbolically, what every motion, what every position, all the imagery, what it means. So when I work with somebody, we go through a series of scenes, and I act out like I'm a mirror and reflect back through motions and positions and comments and things exactly what is going on. And there's always a resolution. There's always a shift an answer to help us to become more aware and to shift out of the negative into more of a positive. So that's one of the gifts that I share, spiritual blueprinting, one of the offerings. In addition to the teachings about the blueprint, and certainly I have done many other things. And I hope you enjoyed that meditation if you were here at the very beginning, because, well, first may I tell you about my book? Shaun, can we go to my book? Or do you have another question?
No, we can go to your book, but I just want to share.
Okay, please.
And this is not an infomercial. I've done lots of healings with different people, and I just want to share how practical and useful what I experienced with you is. You know, that I didn't know what to expect. And I was happily surprised that you were able to tune into exactly what I'm going through now, what obstacles that I have that I've drug in to this life, and how to overcome them and heal them. Yes. And that, to me, that is just amazing, because so many healers and stuff, they want to drag you on, but you actually, I could take that information and as is, don't need follow-ups, and it was amazing. So I just want to share that real quick while we're on that subject.
Very powerful, because it's experiential. You feel it, because it's, you know, you feel all the energy with the motions and the positions and things. Yes.
Yeah. So okay. So let's move on to your book.
Okay. Let me just share my book. It's called The Dance of Ego in Essence. That's and then there's a companion journal, and Kathy Mason I worked with her for so long, and we did these beautiful books together. And certainly The Dance of Ego in Essence is Confessions of a Divine Diva. Now, I had, for 6 months, I had viral thyroiditis, and I was down. I wasn't able to do much of anything, because I didn't have the energy. And when I recovered from that virus, I asked the higher powers that be what I should do first, you know, because I hadn't done any work for a while. And I was told to get up early and to go to my office and write confessions. And I'm like, really, you know, I'm not into that at all. And I've been a spiritual teacher for 20 some years or so. And so really, but I thought, I asked for it. And so I did it. And I said, well, I can do this for like 21 days. It takes 21 days to create a habit. No, it's like, nope. Okay, a month, 30. Nope, 40. So I thought, 40, what is the significance of 40? And of course, I thought of all the 40 day flood, 40 years in the wilderness. Jesus spent 40 days in, you know, Gethsemane, and gestation for the human is 40 weeks. You know, there's a lot of 40s. And so when I looked at it, I realized 40 represents rebirth. And that's what happens to us when we have these spiritually transformative experiences, when we have NDEs. And certainly, I didn't know what to expect, but I went to my office and made this commitment. So I just lit a candle for a little focal point, sat there in the silence for a few minutes, and this word came to me, discipline. And I'm like, oh, I can't stand the idea of anybody telling me what to do or how to do it. And I thought, well, there's my first confession. So I grabbed my journal and I wrote it down. And then I just wrote my stories. I wrote how, as a child, I was disciplined harshly because my parents were so conservative, and they believed that everything you did wrong was a sin. So they had to keep us on the straight and narrow, or else we were going to hell in a handbasket. And I thought, oh, wow, and my dad, he was a little more harsh. My mother used to stand me in the corner. Well, I was a hyperactive child, and that was torture. And then I realized that my desk is in the corner in my office, but I can look out the window and I can look at, so I've kind of overcome that. But discipline, I realized you have to, it has to become integrated into us as self-discipline. And when we have self-discipline, we can say no to one thing, so we can say yes to something else. And discipline becomes direction. And so that ended my first journal entry, and with an affirmation of how I am in harmony with things, instead of all that, So what I wrote about was my evolution from, when I was a child until I make decisions and pursue directions that are in harmony with my truth. I thought, wow, this is cool. So later that day, I actually also did a meditation. And then each of those meditations I recorded recently with a gifted artist. So you heard one of them today. And so the second day, I got up and went to my office, and I sat for a couple minutes, and I received another word, scattered. And I'm like, oh, I'm hyper. Creative people have ideas here and there and everywhere, and it's hard to stay focused on one or the other to finish a project, But I wrote about how I moved out of being scattered to being more focused. And the next day, every day, there were times when I was, just by the halfway through, I was euphoric, because every day as I wrote my stories and I wrote these confessions, I was letting go consciously, and I could see it because it was in the writing, and it was so huge. This was supposed to be a journal, and then I was told by the higher powers that be to share it, because I had shared a few days. Every once in a while I'd share something with friends, and they would say, oh my gosh, when I read your confessions, because they're universal issues, I was able to look inside at my own issues and let them go. And it helped me so much. So you have to share this. And so that is what I did. And the Confessions of the Divine Diva is a powerful exercise. And with it comes a companion journal called Embrace Your Divine Inner Diva. And it is an exercise, it's a holistic exercise book that helps bring it to light and bring it home, because it's compatible with the holistic process of the blueprint. So I have that and a few other things. I did a series of classes, and I certainly have those beautiful meditations that just really are empowering as well. So those are some of the things that I have brought forth to help others on the journey here that we're on together. So
thank you very, hopefully everybody noticed that was a whole free writing lesson right there. On
yes.
Everybody who's thinking about writing a book, you just told people how to do it.
Yes,
and I love that.
I wrote this book in 40 days, and I did some editing, but not a lot. Of course, it took a lot longer than that to put it together.
Right.
But yes. And like I said, please, when you have these dramatic events that happen, write it down, because there's so much. Every detail that you put down, there's something behind it that's hidden, something symbolic that can really make a difference in your lives. And certainly that happened with me when I wrote about the past lives, and was able to put that all into harmony, because then it makes sense. And I could sense and learn more about the deeper meaning of things. In fact, every day, I still think of them. And every now and then something pops, or I'll see something and I'm like, oh yes, that's what that meant, or that's how this can help me. So are there any other questions or anything else? I think we're just about over our time.
Yeah, I have two final questions.
Okay.
So the first is going to be, from your own experience, what do you recommend as a practice to develop our spiritual awareness and speed up our evolutionary process? And then the final question after that will be, what's the takeaway? What is the biggest thing that you want people to take home tonight?
Okay, so process. I mentioned I'm not good at meditation, but I do my best to sit and to be silent and just allow. I like Suzanne Giesman's sip of the divine, where it doesn't have to be huge and full, but there's this whole idea of, there was a book, what was it? Chop wood, carry water, or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's about living your truth, not striving for it, because I think the spiritual journey, and I try not to call it a journey, but that's words that we're all comfortable with. It is a process that we learn and grow and evolve and discover who we are and why we are here and how we're connected with everything and everyone. And so I think we need to do some reading and studying until we get to a point where our heads are out to here, and then we need to experience it instead of just trying to cram information in here. But we need a little bit of that. We need quiet time, because that's when we receive guidance and information. And when the channels are open, we need to ask, because if we don't ask for experiences, if we don't ask for answers, if we don't ask for guidance, we won't receive it. So asking is real important, and knowing that it's right there at our fingertips. It's all right here. We all are divine beings that have so much to give and so much to offer. And truth be told, you don't have to do the big stuff. Just be present and just show up. And perhaps this is the takeaway. Show up. I once did a healing, and this gal says, well, should I change jobs? Because, I'm not sure what I should do. So she's asking for my intuitive read on this. And the guidance was, it doesn't matter what you do, who you serve, where you work, just show up as love, as the presence of God. Show up as the hands, the heart, and the voice of God, as the love that you are. And when you look into the eyes of another, see the truth of their being, and just allow that love and light to just shine forth. You are divine.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing evening. And I definitely want you to come back and do a workshop or something.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Like you did at IANDS. Yeah, it'd be very cool. Because I think I can speak on behalf of many people here that there's so much more information that, that it would be great to get in more detail that you have.
And when I do that, it is experiential, because I guide you back in time and you actually have an experience or two. So that's kind of cool.
It's very cool. I mean, from what I experienced, the other day, it's awesome. And I hope that everybody will take a chance go to Pamela's website and check everything out. There's so
Yes.
much
So
information,
much there.
tons of free stuff. And it's really awesome. So thank you again for spending time with us. And thank you to
My
Catherine
pleasure.
and Susan and Kathy Mason for
Yes,
helping
thank you.
moderate up for
Yes,
us.
thank you. Thank you.
And to everybody at Hawaiian IANDS and all of you that participated tonight, thank you so much. And hopefully we will see you all at our sharing group on the 18th.
Yes, thank you.
And
Blessings.
thank you so for staying up at 2 a.m. in London to be with us.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank
Have a
you,
good night,
Shaun.
everybody.
Good night.
Talk to you soon. Aloha.